So, Chi, having talked about what bias is, if we want to talk about, well, what can we do? Allyship is such a great starting point. What is allyship?
Helen, you know I love talking about allyship. And I think for me, allyship, I think one definition will not do it justice. So when I talk about what allyship is, I think it really is important for us to have a look at some words that describe what allyship is. So I'll probably say education, supporting, making a mistake, amplifying voices, learning, unlearning, relearning. I'll probably say allyship is also that lifelong journey that we're all on. But if I had to give a very simple definition of what an ally is, let's think about what an ally does do. Okay, an ally supports people from marginalised identities. That's essentially what an ally does. Okay, and I think when we talk about allyship, it really is important to talk about active allyship. There's no point saying, oh, I'm an ally, if you're not being active. And I think we've had this conversation a lot because you are an ally to me, right? And you've been on that journey. So you've been an amazing ally to me. And I think the great thing about being an ally is that we will make mistakes along the way. Allyship is a journey. There are times when we just don't know what to do. But I'll say you've been a pretty excellent ally to me, and you've amplified my voice. How's that journey been for you, being an ally for me, Helen?
So I find this really uncomfortable, which is perhaps another word to use in the definition of allyship. It is uncomfortable. The reason I find this uncomfortable, I think, is because if you say I'm a good ally, I'll sort of cringe, and I don't think I've done that much. I don't think I've done that well. I still make a lot of mistakes. But then if I go back to the definition you've given, making mistakes is part of it. I guess if I go back, we talk a lot about 2020, what happened to George Floyd, really opening the floodgates for so much more of these conversations. And I felt the need to educate myself. That's a word you've used as well, is education, learning. I was reading about racism. I was reading about people's experiences. And then I was also very aware that my social media feed was very white. Mm-hmm. So I went looking for people of colour to give me a different perspective and to learn different experiences, which is how we connected on LinkedIn. And I suppose then it's been from that reading, from conversations with you, from reading your blog, I have picked up ideas on what I could be doing to be an ally. So when you talk, for example, about amplifying your voice, what am I doing? If you post something on social media, how am I liking that, commenting on that, reposting that to amplify your voice? You also talk a lot about having your voice or having your name spoken about in spaces where your name would not be spoken. Yeah. So talking to this dance company about work, okay, who else's name could I bring into this? Mm-hmm. And again, my discomfort is it's very easy for me to say, well, I could do that. Mm-hmm. Lyndon wants some resources on allyship. I could do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could, but then what have I missed by not bringing in another person and creating an extra opportunity? So yeah, it's still uncomfortable for me because I'm sure there's so many more things I could be doing. And I think straight away, if I say I'm a good ally, I've got something wrong straight away because it's not in thinking I'm a good one. As you say, it's being active in doing something. One of the things I often find powerful when we're running workshops on allyship, we ask people, when do you wish you'd had an ally? That friend in the room. What is that for you? When do you wish you'd had an ally, and what would an ally do?
And I think for me, as I mentioned about you being my ally, there's one thing you do a lot. You listen. And you just listen. And I think that really is important. That's another word to describe what an ally does. You don't really have to have the answer. But Helen, I just want you to listen. This is my lived experience as a woman. This is my lived experience as a Black British woman. I just want you to listen. You don't have to say anything. And that's what's really, really strong. And I think for me, I'm quite lucky now because the people I interact with, people like you are allies. And you are allies to me, and you listen, and you amplify, and you don't profess to know it all, okay? And you make mistakes. And think about it, I'm completely immersed in this topic, but I still make mistakes as well. And that's part of being human, right? And this is why we talk about allyship being that lifelong journey that never, ever ends. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
I love that so much. I love the openness to, we're going to make mistakes. I just want to be listened to. You know, so often even in putting these resources together, we might think, we need to give people answers. Actually, what we're realizing here is the power of just having a conversation, listening to somebody else's experience. And I know both of us found that so powerful watching Unboxed, to see Sarah stepping on Chris's shoes, like trying to walk in his shoes, experience what he's experienced. I can never live your lived experience, but I can listen and try and understand.
Totally. And I think it's the same for Sarah. Sarah can never live Chris's experiences, but she can listen. She can educate herself. And that's what's really, really important. And I think another thing I would like to mention is performative allyship. I think we have to be really, really careful. And I see that a lot during the month of June. We've got Pride Month, right? And there are rainbow flags everywhere. There's merchandise. It comes out on the 1st of June, and then it's packed away on the 30th of June to come out again next year. And I think what's really important that we have to recognise that we are allies 365 days of the year, okay? We are always allies. So what are you doing to be an active ally? What are you doing to be a good ally? That's what we should really be asking ourselves.
It's a brilliant question. So if we were to say then, what would be some of those starting points? What are some things that we could do to start our allyship journey? We talk a lot about learning, education, and that might just be having a conversation, right? I don't need to go and, like you say, I'm never going to know everything. So I might say, okay, it's Pride Month, and I know that one of my friends is non-binary. And so do I go and have a conversation with them and say, tell me about your experience? Or I know that one of my friends is a Black British woman, and I go and ask them about, what has your experience been? Would you be open to sharing with me what your experience has been as a Black British woman, just so I can understand?
And I think also as an allies, it's fine if that your non-binary friend or your Black British woman friend says, Helen, go and educate yourself, because I don't want to talk about it at the moment. And I think the key thing is use it as a learning moment. You know, okay, not a problem. You know, this person doesn't want to talk about it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to educate myself about it. And I often have people say to me, Chikere, where do I start? And I always say, start where you find the most difficult.
I love that point as well around, don't expect the person who's experienced that bias, don't expect them to do the work for you. So if I just come to you, I mean, how many people will have come to you since 2020? Oh, well, Chikere, tell me what it's like. Tell me about racism. Really? Yeah. So one, you've experienced racism and now you want me to tell you all about it? Like, that's not fair. Yeah. And so I find it interesting as well, because we talk about what are the best resources out there. We can point to some of those, but just a quick Google can give you a lot of great information, right? We've got Stonewall talking about Pride Month. There's so much information about the experiences of Black British people from the Windrush generation. So a quick Google, you know, what do people experience as racism? You can learn a starting point. And then if I were to go to somebody and say, tell me about your experience, maybe I can share with them, look, I've done a bit of research, but I want to hear it from your perspective, if you're happy to share that with me.
Totally agree. And that's the key thing about an ally. We do the work. Okay, we have to educate ourselves. We've got to do the work. So that's really important. And I think as an ally, that's what I strive to do every single day. And as I said to you, I'm not an expert. Okay, I don't profess to get it right all the time. I'm completely immersed in the topic, but I get it wrong, but I make an effort.
And I wonder if there's just something here about making this really simple or everyday stuff. Like when I asked before, when have you wanted an ally, or when do you wish you'd had an ally? There's something about, you know, well, I was at school and somebody was picking on me. You know, I wish that somebody else had come along and stuck up for me, or when I went to the teacher and said that wasn't fair, if somebody else had said, yeah, I saw that as well, I didn't think that was fair. Like, this doesn't have to be this really, I've got to educate myself on racism. It could be as simple as sticking up for somebody in the playground, going along with somebody to have a difficult conversation. Mm-hmm. This can be really simple everyday stuff.
I totally agree. And that's just reminded me, actually, not long ago, working in the City of London, maybe pre-2020, you know, I have got a very unusual name. I'm very proud of my name. And I think, Helen, we've had this conversation before. And just, you know, people making fun of my name. You know, I'm not going to call you that. Why don't you have a normal name? And everyone laughing, but people knowing that's wrong. Nobody's sticking up for me. people in the office laughing. So just simple things, are we making an effort to know our colleagues, to know our friends? What do we do and how are we sticking up for people? How are we being allies? How are we being good allies? How are we being active allies?